Hey everybody, Jason here. I'm getting ready to start a video for my drive home, and just in case the video gets cut short for any reason, and I don't get to finish it, or I get home before I can finish it, I wanted to say what it's about up front and list off a couple things that I wanted to bullet points. Basically, I wanted to talk about before I get to them in case it gets cut off. But it was an idea I've been thinking about for a while, and it's basically just using beginner box or starter boxes for mini campaigns, and not investing anything else time or money wise into a product. And that's not to say that I want people to not to buy things or to spend less money, but I mean just an idea of, if you're gaming on a budget but you really want to play, some starter boxes offer the basic rules and adventures and character sheets and dice and everything you need in one box. So instead of spending $60 or $70 on books plus dice plus this plus that, you might be able to get a starter box for like 40 or 50 bucks that includes dice that you might have to share, character sheets, a small campaign book with 5 or 6 adventures, or like a city-state type book that details a city or an area to adventure in, and some basic rules. But anyway, some bullet points I wanted to touch on before I actually start the video, because like I said, I don't know if the video is going to get cut off. Somebody may call and it might get interrupted. I don't know. But anyway, one was learning of minimal rules and time involved. 2 was an easy or simple character generation and advancement. And the beginning and end of a story, like a set beginning and end of a story or campaign, mini campaign. No burnout, which might cause your group to have a desire to come back and play more of that specific game or world or whatever. Like I said, it's a cost saver. There's no player's handbooks, GM's guides, monster manuals, all that stuff. Shelf space, which could be a big one. And the last thing I wanted to kind of mention, I guess, was who keeps the box once you guys are done playing. We'll see if I get that far. Anyway, so the first thing I had was learning of minimal rules and time involved. So I'm going to use the D&D 5e starter box as an example, probably for most of this, because that's one of the few that I've played. I know there are other starter boxes out there, but that's the only one that I've really had much experience with, and it's really good. I'm not the biggest fan of 5e. But I think at lower levels, especially the beginner levels, it's really fun and really good, and you get a good amount of options and customizing of your character and things like that without it being too much. It's a comfortable amount. So, I want to say that the box set goes through 5th level, maybe 6th. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's been a long time since we played it. The Lost Mines of Phandelver. But so, say if you're, you get a group of people together and you are going to play one of these mini campaigns from a starter box. You don't have to prepare ahead for 20 levels, and I know that might be a little, more than what is realistic. That's not very realistic, I guess, but if you have a game book or a player's handbook that has 20 levels in it, you're probably going to skip ahead and start seeing what other powers you can get at higher levels. But if you start out and you're just using a book that's got the first 5 or 6 levels in it or something like that, you don't have a million options and feats and things to go through. So it's going to be easy to kind of think ahead about where you want your character to go, what kind of designs you might do for it, things like that. And so you don't have to learn a lot of rules. A lot of times the beginner boxes don't have every rule, every little piece of mechanical information you need to have to play an advanced game, and you might just have the basic rules, which is cool. And so again, minimal rules. You don't have to learn a whole lot. So it's easier to get playing. It's faster to start your campaign. You can get into the meat of the game faster than sitting around learning rules, things like that. And if you only have one box and the rules are real light, not everybody has to sit around and share players' handbooks and invest money and things like that. So, and plus there's a lot less rules lawyering and a lot less pausing in the middle of a game to check a rule or something like that, because there's a lot less of them. Which, if you don't know they're not there, then it's not really going to interrupt your game at all. As far as not having those rules there. And the second thing I wanted to touch on was the easy and simple character generation and advancement, which I kind of touched on a second ago. But basically, if you're playing a game like D&D where you level up and you hit level 3 or whatever, you don't have to worry about, there's 7 different feats I could get at this level, and then another 5 or 6 I could get at the next level. How do I have to plan this out? Well, if you're playing beginner box, I might only have 10 feats listed. And, this is just an example, but so there might be a little bit less customization than if you were playing out of a player's handbook or a full rule book, full core book. But in a way, having a little bit less options might give you a little bit more freedom. The whole term, sometimes less is more. This could also be applied in role-playing games, which you might not think so, but it might. So there's always that. Also, a beginning and end of your story. So if you buy a pre-built campaign box, like a beginner box, for example, like the Lost Mines of Phandelver, the story that's in the 5e box, it's going to last you more than one session. It's going to last, I think when our group played it, it took us a good 6 or 7 sessions to get through it, and we played an average of 3.5 to 4-5 hours a session. And we're also the kind of group that has a lot of small talk and joking and fooling around, and we spend lots of time in downtime in our game shopping and buying equipment and stuff like that. But so you could get a good 4 or 5 or more sessions out of a beginner campaign. Some beginner campaigns, again, I don't know that there's a lot of these boxes out there. I've seen obviously 5e, Pathfinder has one, the new Star Trek game has one, Call of Cthulhu has one, the new Warhammer 40k Wrath and Glory has one. I don't think there's 4 different Star Wars ones, but those are mainly the Star Wars ones are made to get through completely in one night. It's not really a campaign, it's just a one-shot scenario. However, online for the Star Wars ones, there are follow-up campaigns in PDF that you can get for free. So those can go for more than one session if you really want them to. You just don't have a whole lot of character advancement in those, which there's a little bit, but not a lot. But again, if you're just looking to have, a couple sessions of a game, you can get a Star Wars starter box set for $30, and there's a one-shot campaign inside, not campaign, there's a one-shot adventure inside that teaches you all the rules as you go along, so you don't necessarily have to read the rule book if you're a player. And there are extra characters online for free, and there are extra adventures online on the Fantasy Flight game site for free also. So Star Wars is a good idea too. And there's all kinds of things out there like dice apps and free dice apps for your phones, so you don't necessarily have to buy dice. If your group doesn't want to share a set of dice, there's all kinds of free dice apps and stuff that you can download individually for your phones and your iPods and stuff like that. But so anyway, the beginning and end of a story. If you have a beginning of your story, that it's going to last on average probably 5 or 6 sessions. What the definite ending of your story or campaign is going to be. There's closure, and you can have that sort of closure along with the growth of your character, and growth of a character over the course of 20 levels is not really I don't want to say it's not feasible. It's possible. Anything's possible. But the idea of growth for me, for a character through a story of maybe 4 or 5 levels, it's a shorter arc. It's a much more tighter and focused narrative for your character's story. And I think that it might be a little easier to do over 4 or 5 levels rather than 20, because at some point the character might get a little stale. You might get bored with it. You might think, well, this arc has been drawn out a little bit, or it just hasn't progressed the way you wanted it to. But I think, just like a television series, sometimes 22 episodes in a season is a little long, and when you go with a shorter season, like say 10, 11 episodes, like Netflix does sometimes, you can get a tighter story arc in that shorter amount of time. So you got like I said, beginning and end of a story, which also can help with the beginning and end of your character's arc itself. No burnout, which could cause your characters and your players to want to come back. So if you're playing, like we're playing, for example, Hoard of the Dragon Queen for 5th edition D&D, and I'm getting burnt out on it. I enjoy playing, but the storyline is so long and drug out so far that with us only playing once a month, and sometimes those sessions getting canceled and averaging out at probably 10 times a year that we play, we've been playing Hoard of the Dragon Queen for almost 2 years now, and it's wearing a little thin. Not that I don't like playing it, because I do. I'm enjoying the game and I'm enjoying the story, but I want to move on to something else. You know what I mean? I'm ready to move on, getting burnt out with it. I'm also getting a little burnt out with the D&D 5th edition system, which I've talked about before. I like it. I think it's a good system and it works well for what it does. But for what it does, I'm getting a little burnout on. I want to try something a little different, a different system. So if you're playing a beginner box, more than likely you won't get burnt out on it, because it's only going to go 5 or 6 sessions, maybe more. You know, so there's not a whole lot of time to get burnt out on it. It might take a session or 2 to get used to the rules, and another 2 or 3 sessions to be comfortable enough with them to where you're not looking at the rule book every other, turn or round or whatever, looking up a new ability or power. But no burnout, or a lesser chance of burnout, system burnout, or even story burnout for that matter too. If you're playing a story that's not super fun, it might not last a long time anyway, so there's that. Another one that I wanted to bring up was being a cost saver. You don't have to shell out $60 for a player's handbook, another 50 or 60 for a DM's guide, and another 50 or 60 for a monster manual, or just $60 for a core book in general that you never know how long you're gonna, you're never gonna use it again. You might not like it enough to use it after the short campaign that you're playing in. So, and plus not everybody has to do it. Rather than every player going and buying a $40 or $50 book or more, everybody can chip in that's playing, and say you got 5 players, everybody chips in $10. That's $50 for your box set. That's it. That's your buy-ins, $10. If you don't enjoy the game, $10 is no big loss. You spend that, in a week going to McDonald's twice for lunch at work. You know what I mean? So that's not a big deal. But I think the buy-in using a beginner box is smart. Even if you know you're going to play a game probably past the beginner box, I still feel like a beginner box is probably a good idea, because you just know for sure. You just get that little hint of, okay, I am comfortable with this. If you like the system and the story enough, a few extra bucks given to the company that made it can't hurt. It can only help, And then you might find out, gee, I really thought I was going to enjoy this a lot more than I did. Maybe this just isn't for our group. It's not for me or whatever. But again, the buy-in is very low. So I think that's another good selling point for. I'm not trying to be a sales pitch or give a sales pitch for beginner boxes, but that's kind of, it's helpful, especially when you're gaming on a budget. Shelf space was one of the other ones that I had written down. I have hundreds of game books. For me, shelf space isn't that big of an issue because I've got so many things that I kind of have already accepted the fact that my shelves are stacked to their limit anyway. I can get rid of a few books, I can put some stuff in boxes and rotate them out now and then and bring some things back to the shelf that I haven't seen in a while and things like that. But, you know, if you're someone who has limited shelf space in your home and you don't have a lot of stuff, you know, anybody who is a collector of role-playing games knows that there's a difference between buying a role-playing game and being a collector of games. I've got more games than I will ever play, more games than I will ever finish reading. But you never know, there's that one nugget of a sentence or a paragraph or a chapter in a book that inspires you for another game or something else. And those little things are gold for some people. And not only that, some people enjoy reading role-playing games like they enjoy reading comic books or novels or watching a TV show. I'm that way, so I get that. But some people don't have the shelf space in their house to have a ton of role-playing game stuff. You don't want your dice lost, you know, everywhere. Your cats, your dogs getting into your dice bag and tearing stuff up or whatever. You know, if you have a little box, you know, this big, it holds your adventure book, your rule book, a few of your maps, your tokens, and your dice. It's that big. You can put it on a shelf, you know, put it in one of your drawers, your sock drawer or something. I mean, whatever. You know what I mean? So it can save space. It's a big space saver. You know, plus your books aren't going to get dropped and pulled off the shelf and torn around and pages ripped and this and that. You know, if it's in a little box, it can be fairly well protected. And the last bullet point that I had written down was who keeps the box when you guys are done playing. That's obviously up to your group, but I imagine you could probably say whoever takes the effort and time to either run the game, let them keep the box because they put the most time into it, or let somebody else take the box that might want to run the game again, or maybe take those rules and stuff and create further adventures to run for the group and have somebody else run the group, or whoever paid the most for it, or roll a die for it. You got dice in your set, right? You roll a die for it. Or maybe you could just, as a group, trade it in for trade value somewhere and get money towards another set or something like that. But there's a million things you can do with the box once you're done playing in the campaign. I know the Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing beginner box that just came out for the new edition. I've not seen it physically with my hands, but from what I've seen of it online, I think there's a book in it that details in fairly well detail a starting city with enough information in it to where you can use what's in it and keep making further adventures set in and around that city. If that's the only set that you have, you don't have to buy the core book to keep writing new adventures. Now, of course, that would help, obviously, but not necessary. It's something you could, you know, just use that. If you only have limited money or funds, you can keep writing new scenarios out of that book for that area until you have the money to get a new source book or a new splat book or a new, you know, the core book that has all the information in it or whatever. So there's always that, you know. Wow, traffic is terrible. So, you know, those are just some of my ideas for using a beginner box as your campaign, a mini campaign, and not purchasing core books if you can't afford it. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy core books because they're a waste of money. Core books are fantastic. I have a million of them. But I'm just saying, if you're a group on a budget, or if you're a group that's a little burnt out in what you're doing and you want to try something new, but you don't want to commit to having every player spend X amount of money, you know, have everybody in the group chip in $5 or $10 and, you know, get a core box. You know, go to your local game store and pick up a box, or sometimes you can go on online and find boxes cheaper than retail if you're in that big of a pinch for money, so your buy-in for it is even less per player. But, you know, again, those are just some ideas for you know, being a proponent for beginner boxes as campaigns. And I'm getting ready to pull into the house here in a second, so this 20-minute video worked out just fine, and that was a good timing. So Anyway, thanks everybody for listening to me ramble. Hopefully the video sounds good and it's not too shaky because of my get up here. I know it's a little shaky, but I might be able to fix that in post or something. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you guys are having a good time. Have a good weekend. Play some games and have fun. And we will see you guys later. I'll turn this off as soon as I turn. Okay, peace.